Welcome back to another episode of Work Comp Talk. My name is Carmen, your host for this podcast. Thank you for joining us. Balal Qasim.
Welcome back to me.
Welcome back to everyone who's been watching every single episode that we've been dropping on YouTube. We do appreciate all the comments, by the way. We do see you. We want to give a special shout out to Jack C., Devo Riv, Esperanza Villafan, and Mr. Wilson. They have been continuously following us for months. They've subscribed to our YouTube channel and just recently gave a shout out to the great work that we do as a team and the fact that we know what we're saying.
Yeah, and thank you for listening to us.
Most def. Today's topic is a relatively simple topic. It's something that I believe a lot of people have asked this question more than once. As simple as it sounds, it is a little bit confusing. It can get confusing. And today's topic in particular is going to be, can you work while you're on workers' comp? Sounds like a simple question, but there's a lot to discuss and unfold for it. So
start every lawyer answer with, it depends. Maybe. I don't know. It depends. Yeah, so I think a lot of people get injured on the job. And workers' comp is notoriously crappy for providing benefits to people. And I think people get in a position where they want to know, like, hey, what happens if I get hurt and I need to work? I want to earn income. I want to be able to pay my bills, pay my rent, my mortgage, support my children, and be able to put gas in the tank and do things just to exist. And so it does come up a lot in cases. And I think dependent on where you're at in the case, it can be a yes or it can be a no.
Okay. So this would be for the type of person who's had an injury, obviously, that allows them to continue to work on something, maybe not particularly what they were doing prior. For example, say a construction worker may not be able to pick up all the heavy cement stuff and rocks and tools, whatnot, but this person can essentially could be a barista at Starbucks, right? It's someone that can essentially go back to doing something different. And then you're stuck because you're trying to heal, and then there's benefits involved. I think that's the biggest issue with this question.
Yeah.
If I go back to work, what am I losing out on?
Well, I think it's kind of important to understand the background for it.
Okay.
And the different types of benefits. So generally, when you get hurt at work, you need time to recover. Mm-hmm. And while you're off recovering, you're considered temporarily totally disabled. So if a doctor says that you just shouldn't work at all, if you have a doctor that says, you know what, your injury is so terrible, I don't even want you to have restrictions. You need to sit at home and have bed rest. That would be someone who's temporarily totally disabled.
Okay, gotcha.
Someone who's temporarily partially disabled would be someone that has the ability to work just in a limited capacity.
Say someone who has a cut and they have their hand wrapped. They can't use this hand, but everything else is functional.
Sure. Or, maybe they have a disc issue in their back. And so with, in your example as a construction worker, they normally have to lift sometimes 100, 200 pounds at once. Maybe their lifting restriction is only 15 pounds or something that's significantly less. They're not totally disabled, just they have their limitations. When that happens, the employer has an obligation to determine whether or not they can accommodate those work restrictions. And if the employer cannot accommodate those work restrictions, then the injured worker would be entitled to temporary disability pay. And so it's generally dependent upon how the doctor classifies the individual, and then to what extent, if they're temporarily partially disabled, to what extent the employer then can accommodate those work restrictions.
Gotcha. And what is the ratio, just ballpark number? And I know people constantly ask this question, but what would you say the ratio would be for employers actually being able to accommodate, let's say, a 15-pound situation where you can lift stuff for 15 pounds? Is it usually common for jobs to allow you to go back to work like that in that scenario, or not really?
It really depends on who the employer is and what your job is. If you're a law enforcement officer, there's probably no light duty. Same thing for firefighters. We get that a lot where even the slightest work restriction renders them unable to work because they can't accommodate based on their needs as a department. But I think if you're, maybe in an administrative office environment and you have a lifting restriction, sure, probably a good chance the employer can find something. And also, it's also dependent on how big the employer is. If you're a huge company with other departments and things that people can do, then maybe there's alternative work. If you're a small mom and pop shop and you have one type of employee and that's all you have, construction's a prime example of that. You're either in the back office or you're out on the site.
Right.
And most of the guys who are out on the site may not be qualified to work back office and vice versa. So I think it really just depends on the employer.
Good to know.
So hard to say it is a percentage, but I think more often than not, employers aren't able to accommodate.
And just for those that are watching right now and have no idea what the temporary partial disability pay is, or, you know, the TD benefits are, what would that entitle? Let's just say I can't go back to work because the doctor, you know, gave me a specific amount of work restrictions that my job cannot accommodate. Now I'm stuck at home regardless. What would my pay look like?
So in California, there are minimum and maximum rates, but generally it's 2/3 of what your average weekly wage is calculated leading up to your injury. So if, for example, I'm going to use round numbers because it's easier. I signed up to be a lawyer, not a mathematician, so it's not my wheelhouse. So
Okay. It's all good.
if you were earning, say, this is exorbitant, but, you know, $10,000 a week.
Oh, I wish.
We all do. If you were earning $10,000 a week, your temporary disability rate would be $6,667. But there's a maximum in place.
Okay.
And currently the maximum in California is only $1,200.
Yikes. So it doesn't matter if you're making 10,000, you would not get more than 1,200.
Right. And so, but if you're within the minimum and maximum, then yes, it's just strictly 2/3. So if we took that $10,000 and said $1,000 per week, your temporary disability rate would be $667 per week. And it's 2/3 your average weekly wage, but it's not subject to tax. So it's supposed to reflect what your pre-tax, or excuse me, your post-tax earnings actually are.
I mean, it's good to know, but still shitty situation, especially if you come from an income that significant and your bills, you know, it's that lifestyle. The more you make, the more lifestyle expenses you have. So taking it back down and having a limit to it is it's gonna hurt.
Which is a situation we run into a lot. You know, there's people in the Bay Area that make, you know, a lot of money. And
Good. It's good to know.
Yeah. And unfortunately, they get capped out. And so if you're basing your ability to live, let's say your monthly budget's like $8,000, which is a lot, but people around here do have cost of living like that. But your TD rate's capped at like $1,200 a week or $1,300, whatever it is now. You know, you're significantly handicapped in your ability to meet your monthly needs.
Right.
You know, if you have children in school and stuff like that.
Ugh. So then that's where the question comes in. If I stay home with this temporary disability payment, these TD payments, the benefits, and it's not working out for me, can I find a job elsewhere that is going to accommodate those restrictions and at the same time get the TD benefits, or am I screwed?
No, it's one or the other, unfortunately. So you can't double dip. You can't collect temporary disability because your work is unable to accommodate you and then go get another job and double dip and collect both the paycheck and the benefits. But if you're in a scenario where maybe the new job with restrictions is going to allow you to earn far more money than you would receive via temporary disability, it may be out of necessity that you opt for that. A lot of people just prefer to collect the benefits because they say, well, I don't want to have to go find a job. The insurance company should provide this for me because I was injured, and that's their obligation, which is absolutely true. It's just a matter of whether or not that actually fulfills your needs. And you can't do both.
Yeah.
I think the only scenario that you could collect both is when you have two jobs.
Okay.
And because of work restrictions, because of your injury, you can't work one of the jobs, but you can keep working the other. Then you are still allowed to keep the other job while collecting the temporary partial disability for the job that you cannot work.
Note to self, make sure you have two jobs before you open your workers' comp case, just saying.
But again, it's subject to the minimums and maximums,
Right.
you know, and same thing goes if you have two jobs and because of work restrictions or just the injury and being on TD, you can't work either job.
Right.
Then the income from both jobs is actually taken into account when calculating your temporary disability rate.
But there's still a cap.
But there's still a cap. Yeah, which, you know, most people exceed that cap if you're working two jobs, right?
Of course.
It's just most likely that's going to happen.
Okay, so what happens when you're completely shit out of luck? There is just absolutely nothing you can do about going on another job and you're just living off of that capped benefits for temporary disabilities. What options do you have?
Cut back on your spending if possible, or, you know, go back to work, unfortunately. You know, that's just the way the system's set up. Temporary disability rate does go up every year. Unfortunately, you know,
By the
sometimes-
cents.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't necessarily match what's going on in the real world and with real world costs. When you factor in the caps for temporary disability, it's not factoring in the fact that maybe someone has multiple children, or they're in school, or they have kids with special medical needs, or care needs, or things like that, or they have a sick parent that they're paying for in housing and things like that. So I do think it's just a generalized number that's supposed to be reflective of cost of living increasing every year, but in practicality for a lot of people, it's not.
It sucks.
Yeah, and so some people do say, you know what, I'm going to go back to work, which can complicate the case too.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up because that's where I was going to go to next. So say, okay, cool, you have no option. You have to go back to work. How does that affect your case?
So if you were receiving temporary disability and you opt to take a new job, then you have to notify the insurance company that you have income, and they will terminate your temporary disability because obviously you've been able to return to work. They don't have an obligation.
Right.
The question is whether or not the new job is going to impact you medically, which happens sometimes.
Yeah.
It's, if your skill set is very particular, there's a chance that whatever new job you're going to have is going to be within that skill set and may be as physically taxing as it was before.
Right.
And so you may go to a new job, in which case it may aggravate your medical condition, which would potentially implicate the new employer is the new responsible party for administering medical treatment and benefits. The doctors have an obligation to decide what's called apportionment, meaning determining to what extent your injury and level of permanent disability is associated with old injuries or pre-existing medical conditions and your new injury. And so any subsequent injury via new employment would be factored into that.
It'd be something completely different. Okay.
Yep.
So I guess either way, it's a shitty situation, and in that case, you would want to look into possibly getting out of the workers' comp system ASAP.
Yeah, maybe. And look, there's people who go back to work and they're finding modified work that's totally chill, and it's not making their condition any worse than it is. It's just a matter of knowing your limitations and not doing things to aggravate your condition and make it worse, to not complicate your case and bring in a new employer and all that stuff. I think a lot of people are kind of okay on temporary disability, or they suffer through it as much as possible because they want to keep the case simple and clean, and they don't want to make their condition worse. But sometimes that's just what you have to do. And it's different than being on permanent disability.
Right. So worst case scenario, this is the chance you've been asking for to make you change careers and make you actually do something that's going to potentially pay you more and work and put less strain on your body. And I've seen those type of cases happen as well. For example, those that have worked in construction and they're constantly afraid of change, and you're used to that norm as a family provider, as a construction worker, or any trade that you're doing. You're used to the norm. You're just a hustler. You get into your job and you do it well. The moment that circumstances change for you, it makes you think outside the box. What else am I capable of doing? Well, the architects have shown the blueprints, and I kind of understand it. What if instead I decide while I'm on temporary disability, I may not be making a lot. If I study the blueprints more, maybe get some certifications on it, when I come back to work, I'm going to be that blueprint reader or architect, and I'm going to be the one doing less work and still getting paid that type of amount of money.
There's no restriction on you educating yourself while you're on temporary disability. I've had a lot of clients, they pick up community college courses because I think they kind of see the writing on the wall where they're like, hey, I'm
hurt,
45 or 50 or 30 or whatever their age is, and they're like, this is a poor choice for me to try to go back into this line of work when this is all done because my body's just not going to allow it. And so they have concerns about their future health, and they want to make that pivot. And so while you're on temporary disability, sure, you can go to school. There's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. Again, provided school is not making your condition worse.
Of course not.
But sure, if you want to learn about interior design, architecture, if you're in construction, whatever the case, you want to become a certified inspector or
like a specialist in something.
Yeah, sure, you can do it.
Awesome.
There's no restriction on that, as long as, again, it's not a situation where it's income generating.
Interesting. So tell me something. Obviously, we know that the podcast is sponsored by Pacific Workers, the Lawyers for Injured Workers, serving all of Northern California, which is also happening to be Bilal's company. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you see from clients with this particular question, working while on TD benefits, something else that, it would be important for us to share.
I think something that comes up a lot is, what I think is commonly referred to now as like side hustles.
Ooh,
And like,
yeah.
people have their little thing on their side that they've done, pre-injury and now post-injury. Again, if it's something you were doing to earn money before, I've had quite a few clients, women who do hair and nails on the side just for fun, and they get paid because it's like a family and friend thing. That's fine. You can continue to do that if you're, on work restrictions and your employer can't accommodate those, but those aren't making your condition worse. And what you're doing on the side is within those work restrictions and it's income you earned previously, you're fine. If you start taking up the hair and nail business once you're temporarily totally disabled and you weren't doing that before and now you're earning an income off it, that would be considered income. And there'd potentially be a temporary disability offset against that.
I'm glad you brought that up because there has been cases that I've heard of people getting caught. And yes, there is that thing of private investigators. A lot of people think it's bogus. They think, oh, they're just trying to scare you. No, they legit do hire private investigators to search all of your social media. Be careful what you post. Be careful what you do, where you go, because they're going to be following you. And there has been clients that have gotten caught that are doing side hustles at the same time as they're receiving the TD benefits.
Yeah, they'll hire private investigators. They'll do social media searches. They'll follow you around and literally videotape you. And I've had clients who have gotten caught.
Tell me the story about that, the horseback riding.
No, I mean, that was when I was a defense attorney. We had an injured worker that we had found out or heard that they were teaching horseback riding lessons while they supposedly were off of work due to a knee and a spine injury. And so at the time, yes, I was a defense attorney representing the man and the insurance companies, and we decided to hire someone to go take horseback riding lessons to go record this person. And we did. And so,
wow.
They'll go into the gyms, they will follow you around, they'll watch you go shop at Costco. If you say I have a shoulder injury and you're
picking up a case of water.
Yeah, like they'll go to your job site, like if you're in construction, and sit there and record you working if you've got a second construction job. So like, yeah, they'll follow you around. I think there was it was a firefighter, I want to say, that was a Los Angeles County employee who, after he had settled his workers' comp case, they found out he had been teaching scuba diving lessons.
Oh, that's right.
I want to say this was just semi-recently, maybe within the last couple of years. It was in the news. And so they wanted their money back. And they'll prosecute him for fraud.
That sucks.
Yeah, so it's absolutely fraud to lie about, a second job that you had while collecting temporary disability. And the district attorney will prosecute you, which means potentially fines, jail time. It's definitely not worth it to try and hide the ball and lie about it.
That sucks.
And the people you think you're friends that you're telling, like, oh, I'm collecting temporary disability, but I'm also got this side hustle. Maybe they don't like you as much as, you think they do. They'll go tell the insurance company. There's always some source. The insurance company will find out about either following you around, or they'll talk to other employees in your employer. They'll dig into your background and they'll track you down.
Of course, because they'd rather spend thousands of dollars hiring a PI just to not pay you instead of paying you, because they'd rather just flat out just flip the coin on you and say, no, you're cheating. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They'll go all out for that, but they won't go all out when it's the other way around, when they need to get shit together.
Yeah, and I get it, we don't support fraud. That's as a law firm, if we find out a client's fraudulent, we won't continue to represent them. We just don't think it's right morally. We're here to help people who are legitimately injured and in need and are doing the right thing. We don't condone that at all. And I think the people that do get busted for fraud, it's, it is what it is. You shouldn't have been doing that. But
that's true. Well, I think we'll wrap up this content for today. It's a lot of information to take in, but long story short, can you work while on workers' comp? Yes.
Yeah. And, one thing we didn't touch on, but I think is an important distinction, is permanent disability benefits are much different than temporary disability benefits. Temporary disability benefits are designed to compensate you while you cannot work.
Right.
Permanent disability benefits are designed to compensate you for the functional limitations that you have from an injury that cannot be fixed with medical treatment.
It's a permanent disability.
Yeah, it's a permanent disability. And so you can work and collect permanent disability at the same time. There is absolutely zero restrictions on that. You can get a new job. You can continue on your old job. There's no problem with that.
They're making, I guess, they're paying for that extra money that you can't possibly make because of that impairment you now have to deal with. So say you lost a leg and you can no longer work in construction. So had you had 2 legs, you would probably making more of a significant amount of money than working at Starbucks per se. So they do come hand in hand. And PD, permanent disability, comes hand in hand with any new job that you decide to take. What's the pay on permanent disability?
Never enough. So permanent disability rates capped at $290 per week right now. And that has not changed since 2014. And so my hope is that there will be some changes in the pipe to make up for some of the cost of living adjustments and wages, because obviously wages have gone up since 2014, including, California minimum wage, for example. And so I think, the permanent disability rates right now are archaic and don't adequately address loss of income. And permanent disability rates don't take into account specialized situations. So, for example, we used to represent a ton of professional athletes, NFL and NBA players. And some of these people had multi-million-dollar contracts. You could have, if you're a lineman, let's say you have a relatively minor thumb or hand injury, but you can't do a proper 3-point stance. You can't balance yourself now. You can't be a lineman anymore. And so the permanent disability for your hand injury may be worth a couple $1,000s. But because of that, you can't work a job that would potentially be multi-million of income. And same thing for any other industry. If you're a construction worker, you have a great union job, you're making good money. Maybe you're a foreman or supervisor, you've been at it for a while, but you can't do the work anymore. Maybe your permanent disability is not that much, but your work restrictions are a problem. Well, you're out of a career, but it doesn't take into account the fact that you might have done this for the next 20, 30 years and made a bunch of money. Yeah, so it's problematic at best.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information. I hope you guys got a better understanding of this question. If you guys have any other comments or questions or things that you guys would like for us to talk about, make sure you drop it on the comments section of our videos. Reach out to us. And most importantly, subscribe, share these videos. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you, Bilal.